This is Pokemon Heart and Soul, a love letter to Heart Gold and Soul Silver. But why? Well, let me tell you, the creator Lil Dill fully remade the classic Johto region and its iconic story and brought it to your Game Boy Advance. But it's not just a regular copy and paste. He carefully selected aspects of the Generation 2 and Generation 4 games while including an insane amount of modern quality of life features like Pokemon that will follow you around, a toggleable physical and special split for those of you that want that classic Generation 3 experience, difficulty options and revamped teams for all boss fights, and even a customizable shiny rate, which I know a lot of you are going to be cheering for. There's about a billion other features that I haven't talked about yet, but don't worry because you're going to see it all in action as I take on this blind hardcore nuzlocke of Pokemon Heart and Soul. First things first, let's appreciate this beautiful starting screen. We see a beautiful combination of Ho-Oh, Lugia, Suicune, and even the lighthouse, so many iconic things that make Johto so recognizable. We then get greeted by Professor Oak, who always asked for my name, but also gives me so many adjustable options. My brain was fried after reading all of them, but let's go over the most important ones. First things first, you can choose to add fairy typing to your run. Perfect for us boomers that are stuck in the past and don't want to adapt to a new type that came out in Generation 6, which by the way is over 12 years old by now. Damn, I feel old. You can turn on your Pokemon's modern move pools, whether nature mints are in the game or not, increase and drop down your shiny chances, which I myself put on the lowest odds to see if I could get a random shiny here and there. You can also choose whether wild Pokemon will drop their items or not, so you don't have to use Thief or Covet to get them. You can increase the XP multiplier to make grinding easier. You can play with level caps but also turn off items in battle so you or the enemy can't use them. And I personally also gave everybody the same IVs and turned off EVs so that everyone we face would be at the same playing field. There's an insane amount of features that are still planned for this game, like unlimited wonder trading, a built-in randomizer, and so much more. So if you guys want me to come back to this game once all of that has been added in, leave it in the comments down below. Now let's give our character a name, shrink down to kid size, and wake up inside of the beautifully new, revamped New Bark Town. And this is a very special day for me because I turned 10. The professor has asked me to come over so I can start my very own Pokemon journey. So we step outside and breathe in the fresh air of the forest around us. And the trees here even have tiny pine cones hanging from them. And for me, it's little details like this that make Pokemon ROM hacks come to life a little bit more. However, what doesn't make me feel alive is getting kicked in the shin by this red-haired kid who was suspiciously looking through Professor Elm's window. But when I wanted to tell him about it, he interrupted me and told me to choose my starter as fast as I could. This is where in my mind I made a special decision. I was going to do a shiny only playthrough, and my starter would be Totodile, obviously the best Johto starter. So I started resetting over and over and over and over again. And I even started to believe that the starters were somehow shiny locked. This caused me to reset faster and faster until the inevitable happened. I saw a couple of frames of this shiny, beautiful Totodile, and before my brain could even register it, I had already reset it again. In that moment, I felt so defeated and bad about myself that I just cut my shiny hunting journey short. I was already constrained by time and didn't feel like wasting more of my precious hours on finding slightly different colored, sparkling Pokemon. So I put that goal to rest and decided from that moment on that I would challenge myself to a hardcore nuzlocke so that I could redeem that shiny Totodile that was now lost forever. So with this newfound courage, I picked up the regular Totodile's Pokeball and vowed to never let it die. Professor Elm then sent me out on a journey to find his colleague Professor Pokemon, who had just found something astonishing never before seen in the Pokemon world. A mystery egg, and he wanted me to come and pick it up. So we headed out into the vast, wonderful world of Johto, and the first thing I did was guess this guy's favorite day of the week. Why? Because he gave me a free Silk Scarf for it, an item that boosts normal type moves which are very common in the early game, so I immediately slapped it on my Totodile to make his scratches stronger. Shortly after, an old man gave me a tour of Cherry Grove City, and the only thing I could focus on was these beautiful cherry blossom trees that they added in. For me, they add even more charm to this already beautiful game. We would then reach the professor's house, where we would see him and Oak. He's not only the most famous professor in the Pokemon world, but also a very kind-hearted gentleman that gave me a Pokemon Pokédex so that I could register anything that I captured. We then say goodbye, take the mystery egg, scramble it in our bag, and run into that red-haired boy from before. He claimed that he was going to be the next Pokemon champion, but I was very surprised to see that he had one of the professor's Pokemon, Chikorita. To my knowledge, the professor wasn't giving out any other Pokemon, so I was already suspicious, but nonetheless, after using a Leer and a few scratches, we managed to overpower him and even took a glimpse at his trainer card before heading back to the lab. My suspicions immediately got confirmed when I saw the police talking to Elm. This red-haired kid clearly stole that Chikorita, so he could probably start his own Pokemon journey. I give the police a detailed description and tell them that his name was Silver. They're going to investigate this phenomenon, but I already know that the police is going to be useless. But that doesn't mean that I have to be the same. So I hand over the scrambled egg to Elm, who hopefully doesn't eat it for breakfast, and in return we get our first set of balls and the free will to explore the region at our own pace. And so I started encountering my first ever team members. On Route 29, I captured Pidgey, who unfortunately is one of the worst starting birds you can get. But our next encounter, Geodude, would definitely make up for that. Until I checked his abilities and noticed that he didn't have Sturdy, which makes it quite easy for my opponents to one-shot him with water or grass type moves. So let's hope that they don't use too many of those. On Route 30 and 31, I would grab Lediba and Mareep, who would give me some much needed type coverage to balance out the team. But the best early game encounter I could have gotten was left for me in Dark Cave. It's everybody's favorite mini Godzilla, Larvitar. I know for now he's basically just the same as Geodude, but if we can somehow keep him alive until he evolves into Tyranitar, we'll have a beast that can literally destroy Tokyo. My next destination would be Violet City, and I love the cultural vibe this place gives off. It really makes me feel like I'm in the rural outskirts of Japan. But I also noticed that every town and location has this beautiful new indication sign that is super stylized. For Violet City, for example, we had a little Bellsprout on it that obviously linked it to its most well-known monument, the Sprout Tower, a place where you can see your reflection everywhere through the monks' bald heads. But this is also the spot where I captured my next encounter, Ghastly, one of the best glass cannons you can get in any hardcore Nuzlocke, and I'm sure we can keep it alive to fully utilize its strong special attacks. Let's climb to the top of the tower so we can take on the Bald Cult's leader, Sage Lee. However, we also see that Silver has just defeated him, and even says that he doesn't understand why people would worship a Pokemon as weak as Bellsprout, because to him, only the strongest ones matter. And I guess he's never done a hardcore Nuzlocke before, because that's where you really need to utilize everything you can get. And because I believe in my Pokemon so much, my Pidgeys sweep through the entirety of Lee's team with gusts, while not even taking a single point of damage. As a reward, he would grant me the HM for Flash, which I hope he doesn't do to other people, and we then went on to Faulkner's Flying type gym to grab my very first gym badge. He led off with a Pidgey that was easily electrocuted by my Mareep's Thunder Shocks, and his second Pokemon would not be Pidgeotto but the actual regional bird, Noctowl. There was one problem though. This thing had Mud Slap, which not only made my Mareep miss its Thunder Shocks, but also would have knocked it out if I didn't swap out into Pidgey. She and Geodude would whittle it down with tackles and gusts, as I kept on swapping between them to counteract the Peck and Mud Slap combo he kept on going for. And once it was at a low enough HP, I would bring in Totodile to deliver the final hit with Water Gun. And so I got my Zephyr badge without any casualties. But I didn't think it would stay like that for much longer, because battles are only going to get harder from here on out. So I tried to prepare myself for that for doing another weekday quiz, which got me a Heartstone, which can boost my Larvitar's rock type attacks, aka great preparation for the upcoming gym leader fight against Bugsy and his bug type Pokemon. And then I went ahead to capture some new Pokemon, which is where the first cracks started to show, as I missed out on a Rattata encounter on Route 36 because I accidentally one-shotted it. The Ruins of Alph did boast a nice flying psychic type for me in Naru that gives me some nice coverage against any fighting or poison types we may encounter. Inside of the ruins themselves, I also completed a special Kabuto puzzle that got me the Dome Fossil, and I could also immediately revive it inside of a nearby research station. And since this Kabuto is basically a gift Pokemon, I will also allow myself to use it, although I'm pretty sure it never left my box. We then got an unexpected call from Professor Elm telling me to come to the Pokemon Center in Violet City. This is where we would get that mystery egg, with the task of trying to hatch it. But I full on ignored that command and plopped it straight in my box, leaving it there to rot. I then headed outside and saw this beautiful kimono girl. She wanted me to take care of that egg really well, but since I'm not a simp, I'm not going to be doing that. So I ignored her advice, headed over to Route 32, and captured the inferior water ground type Wooper. He might not be as good as Swampert, but his typing is really great, only having a grass type weakness, so he could definitely come in handy at some point. Our next roadblock would be Union Cave, home of many hikers that boast rock and ground-type Pokemon. So I tried to fit in with them by capturing my next encounter, Sandshrew. But as you may know, Sandshrew is notoriously bad in nearly every Nuzlocke you play, as it has a very mediocre move pool and stats. So he could definitely benefit from a glow-up. Like this guy here, Fire Breather Bill. He had one of the coolest and most colorful outfits in all of Pokemon and made me kind of jealous. I mean, who doesn't want to be a fashion statement like Fire Breather Bill? With this newfound self-love, I'd reached the end of the cave, picked some berries, and captured my next encounter, Ekans. That might seem like a really bad Pokemon, because just like Sandshrew, it's pretty damn mediocre. However, its ability Intimidate definitely makes up for that, as we can use that to lower the attack of any hard-hitting opponents we may come across. The nearest example being Bugsy's Scyther. I couldn't go and take him on yet because Team Rocket, an evil crime organization, had not only taken over the town, but also started abusing Slowpokes at the Slowpoke Well, because their tails are a delicacy that apparently everybody wants to eat. Well, not me. So I drummed up the townspeople to fight back and only got the support of one old man named Kurt that ended up breaking his back from falling down the well. So I guess it's time for the 10-year-old kid to save the day again. To bolster my team, I could also grab a Zubat here, a very good encounter for Bugsy because it has a 4 times resistance to bug-type moves. And at the end of the cave, he would stare down against one of Team Rocket's admins, Rotom. He told me to scram and leave this place before I got hurt, but those words didn't scare me. And his actions, even less. As we started off the battle with Natu taking down his coughing after using Confusion twice. But his Houndour would not be a great matchup for me. So I'd swap out into Totodile, who'd clear it out with 2 water guns. And for his last Pokemon, an actual Slowpoke, I would use my newly evolved Fluffy to end off the battle and scare away the evil Mafia. We brought Kurt back home so he could rest up, and as a reward, he would freely make me Pokeballs. But I didn't want this old man's balls. I needed Bugsy's badge, which was now free for me to get. And the really cool thing is that we got to ride an Ariados all the way up to him, and not a robotic Spinnerack like in Hard Gold and Soul Silver. And as I looked him in the eye, I felt like I was fully prepared. I had flying and rock types on the team, so his bug types really shouldn't stand a chance. And the battle also started off in my favor, with Pidgey taking down his Pinecone after using Gust 3 times in a row. However, we did get hit with a headbutt that brought me down to around half of my health. And next up would be his Ledian. That set up a Reflect to block out my physical attacks, but I was still able to hit a very nice hitting Gust before I decided to swap out into Fluffy because I wasn't sure what this thing was going to hit me with. And when I saw a Comet Punch coming out, I was really glad I swapped here, because not only did this paralyze him with my static ability, it also allowed me to survive 2 sets of Comet Punches and clap back with 2 Thunder Shocks, which left him with just Scyther. I knew I was low on HP and I had already used my Oran Berry, so I wanted to swap out, but Bugsy had different plans and used Pursuit to counter my swap and finish off my Fluffy, causing my first death of the run. And this one stung pretty bad because electric types are kind of hard to come by, but I would vow that this pink sheep sacrifice would not be in vain, and sent out Ekans to lower Scyther's attack with Intimidate. Then I'd swap out into Zubat, who could confuse it with a Supersonic, and I would do this 2 more times until its attack was lowered to -3. Then I'd start attacking with Ekans' Poison Stings to try and poison it, but that unfortunately never happened. So after I took enough damage, I decided to swap out into Larvitar, confident that it wouldn't have anything to take me down and that we could just one-shot it with a Rock Throw. Oh, nothing was further from the truth. It had Bullet Seed, a 4 times super effective move against me, and even with the -3 in attack, it only needed 3 hits to take me down, which ended up happening. And that's how I lost one of my best potential team members to an overconfident play. We had to take down this Scyther as fast as we could to avoid losing any more team members. So I brought in Pidgey, hit a couple of Gusts, but the damage just wasn't there. And here I had the choice of either sacking Pidgey or sacking Ekans to get another Intimidate off. I chose for the latter, and sacrificed my Poisonous Snake to the Mantis God as well. 3 team members lost to a single Pokemon. I couldn't believe what was happening. If I would have just lowered its attack to -6, none of this would have happened. So in a desperate attempt, I brought Zubat back out, confused it again, and started hitting Astonishes, hoping that it would either flinch or hit itself in that confusion. None of those things ended up happening. And so I lost my 4th team member to this Scyther as well. I was livid. And I basically only had 1 team member left, Nadu, because Pidgey would just get one-shotted. All he had to do was survive a Pursuit, and then a peck should have been enough damage to take it down. I clicked my last resort and waited to see what would happen. Boom! We did it! Nadu survived, all because of Ekans' intimidates, and against all odds we managed to come out on top to claim the Hive badge as our own. But it came at a very big cost. 4 potential great team members lost. And after grieving them, there would only be one thing that could cheer me up. And that was something you guys could help me with. Clicking that subscribe button. Because we're so close to those 600,000. And it would bring me over the moon if you could hit that number before the end of the year. But it was time to pick myself back up. So I rebuilt a team with everything I had left and evolved Totodile into Croconaw and Pidgey into Pidgeotto. Things that would be absolutely necessary as Silver ambushed me just before Ilex Forest. Like last time, he had made his team stronger and wanted to test its capabilities. But Nadu would immediately shut down his Zubat with just one confusion. Larvitar was no problem either, as we washed it away with a single one of Croconaw's water guns. His Bayleaf would be up next, so I swapped that into Ghastly because I knew its Razor Leaves wouldn't be able to put a dent in me. After using 2 Smogs, we were also able to poison it, tipping the battle into my favor even more. However, after this, Bayleaf put me to sleep, and just on the turn when the poison was about to take it out, it hit a critical hit Razor Leaf. That did just enough damage to take down my Ghastly. The only thing I honestly could have done differently here was swap out into Pidgeotto, but I thought that not even a crit would take down my Ghastly, and that recklessness lost me my 5th team member. And a great one at that, because Gengar would have been good for so many upcoming fights, but it just wasn't meant to be. So I did what I should have done in the first place, taking this thing down with Pidgeotto. I then laid Ghastly to rest inside of our box and chased down a Farfetch'd throughout Ilex Forest so I could get the HM for cut. However, along the way we encountered our next Pokemon, Weedle. And who would have ever thought that a level 8 Weedle would have less than 19 HP? Let me tell you, not me, because I one-shotted it and lost my next encounter. Yeah, it isn't looking too great for us, but Beedrill really isn't that great of a Pokemon, so I wasn't that devastated. I would graciously move through the rest of the forest, stopping by the move tutors for Headbutt and Fury Cutter, plus we also used Naru's charms to guide a Kimono Girl to the exit. On the other side, our next encounter, Ditto, would be waiting for me, but we know this thing is only good for breeding, so let's be honest, it's never going to leave the box either. But I hope to turn my luck around into the big city of opportunities, Goldenrod. At first, I wanted to draw my problems at the local casino, but I knew that was not going to be the right option. So I made my way over to Route 35 and the National Park, which is where I would grab my first Fire-type Growlithe, again, not with Intimidate, but also Nidoran Female. 2 very good Pokemon that once fully evolved can heighten the team to new levels. If I don't lose them with stupid misplays, that is. Speaking of evolving, we also did that to Wooper to get ourselves a Quagsire, and then took on the local radio quiz so that we can listen to some tunes as we bop around the region. This also meant that the notorious run killer Whitney would be back at her gym with her devilish Miltank. And I didn't get a proper fighting type nor a fighting type move to deal with it, so I had to try and improvise. And the strategy I ended up going with was actually pretty good, at least for her first 2 Pokemon, Clefairy and Teddiursa. Because if you didn't know yet, Fury Cutter is a move that powers up every time you use it. And after a couple of turns, it naturally started to do insane amounts of damage, which easily brought me to her final Pokemon, Miltank, and this is where things started to go downhill. She first outsped and used Attract, which didn't allow my Croconaw to attack. So Fury Cutter would be back down to its measly 20 base power. And after getting hit with a Stomp as well, I threw this strategy out of the window. So I swapped out into Quagsire instead and tried to lower its speed with Rock Tombs. And guess what? That also didn't work because it flinched me 2 times in a row with Stomp, which forced me to swap out again. I then went into Geodude, who was great at tanking hits, but still flinched 3 out of the 5 times I tried to attack. I was, however, able to hit 2 Rock Tombs to lower its speed by 2 stages as well, but after I swapped out into Pidgeotto, it started to use Milk Drink and healed up fully. And even though we outsped, our returns were basically doing no damage. It then started using Rollout, so I knew I had to get out of here, and I swapped in Sandshrew because I knew he was able to resist it and tank a couple of hits at least. This entire ordeal allowed me to get it down to red HP, and we lowered its speed even more with the use of Rock Tomb. In the end, we did have to sacrifice Sandshrew for the greater good because nobody else was going to survive a maxed out rollout, but this allowed me to finish it off with Pidgeotto's return. This not only let me acquire the 3rd gym badge after she started crying, but it also got rid of possibly the worst encounter we've had in this game. A setback that I was more than willing to overcome. And overcoming I did. First we evolved Nidoran into Nidorina. Then I captured a tree and immediately released it because I realized that I already missed my encounter on this route. But on the following route we would be met with Stantler, one of the most useful Pokemon for a Johto playthrough. Let me explain why. It's not only got pretty well-rounded stats, but it also has a very nice learn set with with moves like Hypnosis and Stomp that can easily disrupt enemy team momentum. On top of all this, we also have the Intimidate ability, which is always godlike in any Nuzlocke run. With this beautiful deer by our side, we would gallop into Ecruteak City and check out the local dance theater where one of the Kimono Girls' shows got interrupted by a rugged grunt that would have liked to become a professional K-pop idol. So I quickly showed him that his dance moves were absolute garbage and brought out my inner Michael Jackson to show him off the stage. This rewarded me with the crowd's respect and the HM for Surf, a great 90 base power move that Crocodile is going to utilize to the fullest. I'd also heard that the local gym leader was somewhere in the burn tower to investigate the sighting of the legendary beasts. This is also where we met the man that was obsessed with Suicune, Yusin, an interesting character that I would have loved to know more about, but I only had time to get my next encounter inside of this tower, which ended up being Houndour, an arguably better fire type than Growlithe that can also provide more coverage with its dark typing. Moving on to Route 38, I would capture a Meowth, which was definitely the worst thing I could have gotten here, since I could have also gotten a Miltank or a Tauros. But I'll take it and move on to the next rival battle against Silver, right in the middle of the burned tower. And this time, I would beat him without any casualties, as my Crocodile easily one-shotted Larvitar, and Stantler immediately lowered the incoming Bayleaf's attack to reduce the power of his Razor Leaves. It would also put up a decent fight against my Pidgeotto with Tackle and Leech Seed, but in the end, my gusts blew it away. Crocodile would then eat his Remoraid as roasted dinner, and lastly, Golbat would be defeated by a Surf and Rock Tomb. All this battling of ours, however, shook up the entire temple, and it would cause me to fall through the planks beneath me. This is where I would end up in the secret cave where I'd be confronted with Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. The second one would take a particular interest in me. Yusin also came down and thanked me for freeing them, and immediately started chasing after Suicune. I then moved on to Route 42, something I normally never do. That led me into Mount Mortar, where I got jump scared by a Pokemon Maniac that had a Nidoking and Nidoqueen, and if I didn't have Crocodile's advantage, they probably would have wiped like half of my team. But in the end, we got past them and captured our next two encounters, the fighting type Machop and the slight upgrade over Pidgeotto, Fearow. This was the most I could prepare for Morty's gym without taking any necessary risks. So like a blind man, I felt my way through the darkness of his gym and started chanting a spell that would hopefully send his ghost to the afterlife. I led off with my Houndour against his Haunter, expecting that he couldn't really do anything against me. However, he managed to put me to sleep, and because I didn't even have a Dark-type move, I swapped it into Growlithe and Meowth. They forced Haunter to get a curse off, which knocked his own HP down to half, but my little coin cat also got put to sleep, locked in a nightmare and a curse that he unfortunately never woke up from. Another noble team member sacrificed just so Stantler could avoid a Hypnosis and finally take it out with Astonish. Miss Drevis would be up next, and I was able to put it to sleep as it set up a Perish song. I didn't want my Stantler to die after hearing those bad notes, so I swapped out into Growlithe, knocked it down to half HP with a Bite, and forced the switch into his own Stantler. I would counteract this with my own Stantler, who could avoid yet another Hypnosis, put it to sleep himself, and returned away until it would be knocked out. His Miss Drevis would then immediately wake up, outspeed, and hit me with a Psywave. So I couldn't afford to stay in, swapped it into Crocodile, tanked 2 more Psywaves, and took it down with 2 more bites, leaving him with just Gengar. I wasn't sure if it could hit my Stantler, but it was the only way I was going to take this thing down. And as he does, he zoomed past 2 Hypnosises yet again to avoid them, put the Gengar to sleep twice himself, and then knocked it down with a few more Astonishes to prove that he's the true RNG king. I did realize, however, that we got incredibly lucky in this fight, and it could have gone a whole different way if he didn't miss those 5 Hypnosises, but a dub is a dub. Let's grab that fog badge and hit the road again. And when we looked into the sky, we saw this beautiful golden bird, which at the same time was spotted by Baoba, the Safari Zone warden. He invited me to come over to his Safari Zone so we could capture some nice Pokemon there, but I wouldn't be able to hang out for long, so I told him that I would just stop by for one encounter. Until then, I would capture my next Fire-type Ponyta that will hopefully help me out in the Steel-type gym battle against Jasmine. But once I reached Olivine, she wouldn't be around because Silver told me that she was taking care of a sick Pokemon down at the lighthouse. And while I love helping out sick Pokemon, I needed to do a few things first, like beating a sailor in an arm wrestling match, which would see me getting the HM for strength. Yes, I might have dressed up Machop in my clothes because otherwise a 10-year-old would never be able to beat an adult, but it was the only way we could progress. I also learned that this game has the best surfing animation out of any GBA ROM hack, because you're actually riding on the Pokemon that is using Surf for you, which for me was Crocodile, and it really felt like I was bonding with him even more than before. Inside of the seas around Olivine, we also got 3 more encounters. These consisted of Tentacool, Magikarp, and Horsea. All 3 of these could become really helpful if we manage to get Horsey up to Kingdra. It gets the dragon typing. Tentacool is a specially defensive wall that can hit pretty hard, and Gyarados might be the single best Nuzlocke encounter ever, with the Intimidate ability, a great move pool, and stats that make you drool from the mouth. Now I felt fully ready to take on the challenge of the Lighthouse, which was obviously filled with trainers that allowed my Geodude and Natu to evolve into Graveler and Xatu. At the top we met up with Jasmine, who was taking care of a sick Ampharos and wanted me to go grab some medicine from the pharmacy in Cyanwood. This was easier said than done, as we needed to cross the whirlpool-infested seas and dangerous tides of the Whirl Islands. But with the help of Croconaw, we pushed through, picked up what we needed, and had our second encounter with Suicune, who would run away across the water the moment Ucine arrived, which made him think that he needs to earn its respect by defeating me in a Pokemon battle. I gladly agreed to his challenge, but he would find out that it would be harder than he first thought, as Stantler would put his Politoed to sleep and knock it down with a few stomps. He would then proceed to give me a taste of my own medicine by putting my Stantler to sleep with his own hypnosis. However, I wasn't too scared, as Xatu could come in and finish it off with a Shadow Ball, leaving it with just Electrode. And since Electrode can basically not learn anything that can touch ground types, Graveler had an easy time taking it down with 2 more Magnitudes. This would show Ucine that I'm not to be messed with and that he should just leave his dream of getting Suicune behind, because it had clearly chosen me. Chuck's gym was also on this island, so I ended up evolving my Croconaw into Fraligator, Lediba into Ledian, Magikarp into Gyarados, Houndour into Houndoom, and Tentacool into Tentacruel. And with my team pumped up and ready to go, I showed this muscly man that mind always goes over matter. He led off with an intimidating Hitmontop, so I had my Ledian use Reflect to weaken all of his physical moves. And with the help of Zatu's Air Slashes, it would easily be defeated. Following up would be a Sudowoodo that got swept away by my Tentacruel Surfs. This drove him into a corner as he sent out Poliwrath, his ace. I didn't exactly know what this thing's moveset was, but it started to put a lot of my Pokemon to sleep. But with Zatu's early bird ability, that wouldn't be for long, as he woke up nearly instantly and knocked it down with 2 more Air Slashes, leaving it with just Primeape that would be ripped apart shortly after. I was pretty proud of this battle, as I managed to get out of it without any casualties, the first time since Faulkner. But Chuck's wife ended up being impressed as well, and even gave me the HM for Fly as a reward. I know I should probably help out that sick Ampharos before something bad happens to it, but I also really wanted to stop by the Safari Zone because the road over there would give me 3 new possible encounters. After debating for a little bit, I couldn't wait any longer and started the hike of the cliffs on Route 27 and 28. And this is where I discovered something pretty damn cool. The evolution of Dunsparce, the Dunsparce, was in the game, which meant that eventually my Stantler might also be able to evolve into Wordeer, its Hisuian variant, which would somehow make him even more useful than he already is. But until that time came, I started scouring these routes and captured a Seal that would be insane for taking on the 8th gym leader Claire and the champion Lance, because without it, their dragon types might end up being a fork in the road. I also grabbed a pretty useless Gloom and missed out on my encounter inside of the Safari Zone because this Rhyhorn just didn't want to stay in the ball. I didn't let it get to me because we already have a wonderful rock ground typing Graveler, so with this quick detour out of the way, we could travel back to the lighthouse, cure Ampharos, and evolve our Machop into a Machoke to take on the battle against Jasmine. I already anticipated that she would have a Skarmory, so I gave my Stantler Shockwave, and after hitting it with a Hypnosis and 3 of those, the metallic bird would be dismantled. But what I absolutely didn't anticipate was her having a Corsola. Nobody normally struggles against the Corsola, right? But what if it sets up rain and then starts hitting you with rain boosted surfs? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me, and it made me lose my Machoke, even after I put it to sleep 2 times in a row with my Stantler. There's no time to mourn the death of Machoke. It was only used in 1 fight and is not going to be that useful from here on out. The only gym leader it could be good against is probably Pryce, and we already have enough fire types for him. So I sent out Fraligator instead and knocked it down with a Brick Break. Graveler would then proceed to one-shot her Magneton with a Dig, and the last 2 Pokemon she got were Steelix and Scizor. And because the rain was still up, my Fraligator would also enjoy a nice boost to his surfs and clean up like a real alligator janitor. With the Mineral Badge now in my possession and another Pokemon lost, I traveled down to Mahogany Town and Route 43, the place where I was able to capture Girafarig. And just like Stantler, it can evolve into Farigirif, which would make it nearly as useful as Wordeer. Straight after, we heard some rumors about a red Gyarados roaming around the Lake of Rage. And since it was causing lots of trouble for the people around, I took this opportunity to miss my second shiny of the run by knocking it out with a few shockwaves. I already have my superior blue Gyarados, the red one isn't needed. Lance, the champion, witnessed this feat of heroism and thought I would be the perfect guy to go and raid a Team Rocket hideout with him. him. I hesitated at first, but then I thought, hey, I got nothing better to do. Why don't I watch this guy commit manslaughter with his Dragonite and knock some Italian mafia boys on their asses while we're at it. After sneaking my way past their security system and taking out all of my anger upon them, I'd captured my newest encounter coughing inside of here as well, and found the 2 passwords to get into the boss's room, which were Raticate Tail and Slowpoke Tail. On the way, we also got stopped by Silver, who said that Lance absolutely humiliated him, but not even that was enough to make him see that he should treat his Pokemon with respect. So while he goes out to make the same mistakes over and over and over again, I got ready to stand face to face with the boss of Team Rocket. But I got caught off guard. I was expecting a very menacing looking man, someone that would radiate authority. But all we saw was this bozo in a Giovanni costume trying to pass as him, which is obviously not going to work on me. So I promptly put him in his place after surfing away his entire team with Fraligator, but he knew that we weren't going to stop his plans because his voice is the only one that can open up the command room. Unlucky for him, because as he fled the scene, we followed around a Murkrow that was literally boasting around the password while perfectly mimicking Petrel's voice. We'd follow it all the way to the generator room, where we got ambushed by Ariana, one of the other executives, and a grunt. They were about to double team me until my friend Lance jumped in to protect our ass. And if it wasn't for him, this battle would have been a lot harder, because his Dragonite basically killed each and every one of the opposing Pokemon with outrage. The rest of the Team Rocket members and Ariana would then evacuate the building because we were about to blow up the generator that kept the entire place running. This was done by defeating each and every single electrode that was powering it, and even though me and Lance saved Mahogany Town from this criminal organization, there was no rest for the wicked because we needed to get our next gym badge ASAP. And to do that, I would pick up a dragon scale from the old lady that was running the shop before Team Rocket took it over, which allowed my Horsey to evolve all the way into Kingdra, one of the best Johto Pokemon that only has 2 weaknesses, Dragon and Fairy. All because I had a feeling that it was going to help me out in the upcoming gym battle with Pryce. I slipped on my ice skates and slid straight into his lap, starting the battle with our Kingdra against his Cloyster. We all know how terrible its special defense is, so only 2 of my Twisters were enough to blast it away, and with Dugong coming out next, I swapped out into Fraligator to set up an agility. This allowed me to outspeed his entire team as I took down Dugong and Sneasel with Brick Breaks, Jinx with a Crunch, and finally Piloswine with Surf. That's how I acquired my Glacier badge, but the trouble would not stop brewing. Because the moment I stepped foot outside, we got a call from Professor Elm, who stated that Team Rocket took over the radio tower in Goldenrod City to blast their terrible mixtapes to the entire region. So it was now up to me to save the entire region from not only hearing loss, but also a depression. So once I arrived, I started wiping out each and every single grunt that was occupying the building until I reached the director's office, where we would see Petrel again. And I told him that he should probably go back to school because these outfits are fooling absolutely no one. His response to this information was that he had actually captured the real radio director and had locked him up somewhere in a secure place. The only way we would find out this information is if we knocked it out of him. And even though we just beat him at the Rocket Hideout, he had improved his team quite a lot. Like his Pineco had evolved into a fortress, which we burned away with Houndoom's Embers. I know it's kind of crazy that he still doesn't have a better fire-type move, but I'm hoping he'll get one soon. His Macargo would then get defeated by my Graveler's Dig and Magnitude. Closer would make my heart stop because I swapped into Stantler, who took 2 Stirs with only 1 HP remaining, which could have been the end of one of my favorite team members, but I guess his love for me made him hang on and clap back with that Shockwave, leaving him with a single Pupitar that once again got magnituded by Graveler. Once he's defeated, Petrel tells me that he locked up the director somewhere at the bottom of the department store, but I'd still need to find a way to surpass his security system. But I wasn't too worried about that because they call me Ninja Zwiggo for a reason. I also got an insane team buff by evolving Pidgeotto into Pidgeot and Graveler into Golem, which came at the perfect time because once we hit the basement, Silver also wanted to get out, and I wasn't going to let him. So in retaliation, he threw out his Pupitar against my Stantler. The Intimidate I got off here was already amazing, but it also allowed me to swap out into Golem so that he could wallop it with 2 Magnitudes. He tried to get the revenge kill with his Meganium, but I swapped out into Houndoom at the right time, allowing me to get the KO instead with a few Embers and Dark Pulses. I also put his Octillery to sleep with Stantler's Hypnosis and proceeded to take it down with a few returns. I would then swap back out into Golem, who could deal with Houndoom and Golbad by spamming Magnitudes and Rock Tombs. This allowed me to lock Silver up in this basement for the rest of eternity, plus this also gave me enough experience to get 2 amazing new evolutions that will bring our team up to the next level. Wurdeer and Farigiraf. With their normal psychic typings, great move pools, and all around good vibes, I know they'll make this next Team Rocket section a lot easier, because battling through these grunts allowed me to reach the real director who only wanted one thing from me: stop that mixtape and start playing music that people actually love, like the Legend CA soundtrack. Not gonna lie, I can keep vibing to the Lumio City jazz forever. Okay, now that we had acquired the car key, our next objective was clear: taking down Petrel and Ariana on the upper floors of the radio tower. This plan started to get rolling pretty quickly, because Petrel had a team filled with nearly all poison types. And because our team was basically all psychic types, I had no reason to hold back and killed them all in a few hits, which brings us to Ariana. She would also lead with a poison type of her own, Arbok, but it's a well-known fact in the animal kingdom that seahorses eat snakes for breakfast, which is exactly what my Kingdra did. When she brought in Gyarados, however, I went into Wurdeer, who nearly died to a surf. I honestly have no idea how that did so much damage, since Gyarados' special attack is absolute ass, but we returned the favor literally with a return and took it out to turn after. I know that was a lot of turning for one sentence. Let's turn it around again by swapping in Golem and killing her Murkrow with a single fall of some rock tombs. Her Vileplume would then die with the combined powers of Xatu's Air Slash and Farigiraf's Confusion, which meant she only had one Pokemon left: Persian. We all know cats don't like taking baths or water in general, which is why Kingdra could easily clean it up. This victory would lead me to the head of Team Rocket, the man behind every single one of their stupid heists, Archer, and his main mission: bringing back their former leader Giovanni by playing his favorite songs they made together. No wonder he left that team of untalented musicians, so let's shut them up and play some actual good tunes. First things first, Weezing would die to Kingdra's Surfs. Gyarados would do the same but to Twisters. Slowbro would get cut down by 2 air slashes from Xatu. Houndoom would get magnituded by Golem. And last but not least, Bull loses to Psychic Bird. After this defeat, Archer vowed that Team Rocket would one day sign a record deal and bring some of their music to the mainstream. I told them to keep on dreaming, and I think I was right, because until this day, we have never heard anything from them again. As a thank you for saving his entire corporation, the director then comes back in, gives me the Rainbow Wing, and says that it's supposed to summon some kind of legendary peacock on the top of Bell Tower. So with that wing in hand, I would fly to Route 44, unfortunately pick up a Lickitung there, which is a Pokemon nobody wants to use, let's be honest, except for Jessie in the anime, which always made me kind of suspicious. But no matter, because I knew we had to reach Icy Path, and for that we needed to warm ourselves up a bit. So I evolved my Ponyta into a Rapidash, did a ton of new biking ice puzzles that might have made me crash my bike a couple of times. I mean, riding a bicycle on ice isn't the best idea ever, but after a lot of trial and error, we got through, captured potentially the worst ice type to ever exist, Swinub, mainly because you can't get Mamoswine in this game and Piloswine is just really bad. And then I would push away a Kimono girl that got her flip-flops frozen inside of the ice just so we could make it to the last city of Johto, Blackthorn. Not only the hometown of Claire, the gym leader who hates losing the most, but also a sacred place for Dragon-type Pokemon to gather in the Dragon's Den. And with Dragon-type Pokemon, I of course mean the Dragonite and Kingdra line, because those are the only ones that were made in the first 2 generations of Pokemon. Kind of crazy to think about. Speaking of the number 2, that's how many encounters we just unlocked, those being Poliwag and the big huggy bear Ursaring. So I picked both of those up, also grinded up my ice types to get Piloswine and Dewgong because they will be crucial against Claire, and I also got a call from the Herb Center in Goldenrod because they had all of their herbs back in stock, so I started spending my preciously earned cash to buy all of them out so that I could give my Pokemon the right natures. Like for example, giving Modest to special attackers and Adamant to physical attackers. And now that we were fully ready, I walked into our lava pool infested gym, reported that fact to public safety, and I started to cool everything off with my Dewgong as I threw it out against her Dragonair. All we needed here was 2 sets of Icy Winds to take it down, however she was also able to hit a Thunderbolt on me. This actually did pretty decent damage to me, so I swapped out into Piloswine when she brought out her second Dragonair. This allowed me to negate her Thunder Wave, but she would be able to paralyze me the turn after with a Dragon Breath Breath. I then in turn tried to take this thing down with 2 Icy Winds yet again, but on the second one, she had enough and swapped out into Lapras. So I brought in my perfect Icebreaker, Fraligator, and his Brick Breaks, who could knock it out with just 2 of them. We would then be back to square one as my Piloswine took down her Dragonair with 2 Icy Winds. However, now we're paralyzed and basically left with no HP. So I couldn't do anything else but swap out into Wurdeer once her Gyarados hit the field. This thing was actually illegal because it had to move Fly on it, which you could normally never learn, so I gave this cheater a run for its money by destroying it with Wurdeer's Shockwaves, leaving her with just her ace Kingdra. I didn't really know how I was going to defeat this, so I went into Dewgong and lowered its speed with Icy Wind. Then I swapped out into Xatu and used Wish so that I could bring in my own Kingdra and outspeed. This was going well on the first turn when I hit a Twister that did about half, but she would hit me with a Smoke Screen that caused me to miss my second Twister and allowed her to hit a critical hit Dragon Breath that took down my own Kingdra. One of the most painful losses by far because this thing would have been great in the league and post-game, but now we need to lay this seahorse to rest because he lost the mirror match. My Fraligator hates seeing his teammates die, which is why he became so enraged that he took down his Kingdra with 2 more crunches, and if you thought that winning a battle would get me a gym badge or seeing my Pokemon die would give her enough sentiment to give me one, that would absolutely not be the case. She instead would throw a temper tantrum and send me off to her grandpa in the middle of Dragon's Den where I needed to complete one of his stupid quizzes. It was basically all about how you should treat your Pokemon, so I told them with love, the obvious thing, something that Claire apparently has never said before. And after hearing that I was deemed worthy by her oppressors, she started to profusely apologize and even gave me the badge right in front of their noses. So remember kids, if you want to get anything in life, just get an old person and make them disapprove of the one that's causing you troubles. That should fix anything. Just before leaving this cave, however, I would also grab a Dratini for myself so that I could utilize its power as a Dragonite when that time comes. Now I immediately wanted to head over to Victory Road and then the Pokemon League, but I would get a call from Elm first saying that I would have to pick up the Master Ball from his lab as a reward, and I would also have to check out what the Kimono girls were up to because they had summoned me to their dojo for some kind of ritual. So I flew my way to the dojo immediately and saw that Silver somehow escaped from my basement. I would be worried, but he just got his butt kicked by the Kimono girls and his self-confidence is at an all-time low, which meant he wasn't even mad at me anymore. So I could just move past him and challenge all the Kimono girls to a special battle because they wanted to see if we're worthy of seeing their special dance on top of Bell Tower. So on the first girl's Umbreon, I used Golem's Brick Breaks combined with Gyarados' Waterfall. But from here on out, it would become a little tricky because I couldn't swap out my Golem from the first spot, combined with the fact that I already took way too much damage in this first fight, basically meant that we had to take a hit in each and every one of these battles because we had to swap out into the Pokemon that was going to take on the next evolution, which in the second battle ended up being Houndoom against Espeon, which we won after spamming 2 bites. The third one, Flareon, would be easily destroyed by Gyarados' Waterfall. The fourth one was Jolteon, and it couldn't touch my Golem, which meant I could use its Earthquake to knock it down. This only left them with Vaporeon, and I didn't have a good counter for this, so I had to go in Water type versus Water type, with Dewgong having to spam Rest each time he got low on HP, and eventually knocking it out with a ton of Aurora Beams and Icy Winds. Now that we had shown to the Kimono girls how strong we really were, Little Girl walked in saying that they saw a silhouette of a very big bird Pokemon flying across the city, so we naturally had to go and check it out. All of us headed to the Bell Tower and started ascending the floors. I would be excited to see what was at the top if it wasn't for this wonderful Rattata that I ended up capturing, which basically redeems the one we missed at the start of our journey. After this, we finally reached the top, saw a beautiful ceremony of how they all danced together to summon the legendary god of fire, Ho-Oh. This bird, imposing as ever, would sit down on the tower and look down upon me, and this is when I knew that it wanted me to become his trainer. I, however, did not want it because using legendaries in Nuzlocke is very cringe according to the internet, so I buried it under a pile of rocks and left the Kimono girls stunned. I had basically just defeated their god with just a couple of rocks, but I didn't care and moved on to Tojo Falls, where my next encounter Slowpoke would be trapped in his ball. And my next 2 encounters on the way to Victory Road, and inside of Victory Road were Dodrio and Donphan. Not the best encounters, but Donphan can definitely come in handy if I manage to make it through the league. Speaking of the league, I was just about to reach it before Silver tried to kidnap me and put me back into that basement. I guess it finally dawned on him that he had to take revenge, but I wasn't going to let him, and immediately blocked his attempt of taking me away with his Ursaring by taking it down with Wordyr's returns. With Gyarados' Waterfall, we also one-shot his Houndoom, and we also nearly broke his Tyranitar's legs with Golem's Brick Break. But when I saw that it outsped me and nearly killed me with an Earthquake, I knew we had to swap out into Xatu the turn after to cancel it out. Because it basically had no HP left, I took it down with an Air Slash. His Octillery, Golbat, and Meganium would then get destroyed by extra Sensories and Air Slashes from Xatu as well, which marks the point where we defeat Silver and finally get back at him for stealing the Professor's Pokemon by crushing his dream of becoming Pokemon champion just before he was allowed to go for it. I would then leave him in the dust, walk up to Indigo Plateau myself, and make the last few crucial changes to my team so that I would have the biggest chance of coming out of here as champion myself. And so my final team ended up being Houndoom, Wordyr, Xatu, Dewgong, Golem, and Gyarados. And honestly, the only reason I took Dewgong over Fraligator is because it's supposed to be my answer to Lance, so let's hope that he can fulfill that role. But for now, let's walk into Will's Elite Four member room and make sure that his psychic types don't get to look into the future anymore. Because I bet they didn't predict the Gyarados sweep, baby. Yes, Houndoom might have taken out the first Pokemon Girafarig with a Dark Pulse, but once his Slowking came out and I started Dragon Dancing, things were over. I ate up both of the Slow brothers, Espeon and Xatu, with Gyarados' crunches and immediately moved on to the second Elite Four member, Koga. He had heard what had happened to his colleague Will and bolstered his team with a ton of strong poison types, hoping that they could slow down my Gyarados' rage. But I didn't even have to use Gyarados here. I used another setup king, Xatu. Only one Calm Mind was needed to dismantle his entire team, as Extra Sensory took him by surprise and wiped him off the map. And now you think I might have done the exact same thing to Bruno. And yes, this was my plan at first, as I even one-shotted his first Pokemon Hitmonchan after setting up a Calm Mind. However, we got hit with a very hard-hitting Thunder Punch and he brought in Steelix, something we couldn't kill. At least, not with Xatu. So I went into Gyarados, tanked 3 Rock Slides, and eventually knocked out the Solid Snake with 3 Waterfalls. We had taken way too much damage, so for his Machamp, I would swap out into Wordyr. With an Intimidate, we would not only lower its attack, which allowed me to survive a Rock Slide and Cross Chop, but we also clapped back with 2 Psycho Cuts and sent him back to the gym. Now I was in a little bit of a pickle when Heracross came out. I didn't have a single switch in for this because I wasn't sure what it was going to go for, so I got ready to sack one of my team members, Houndoom. He really hasn't been pulling his way throughout any of the fights, and I still have a lot of fire types in the PC. But against all the odds, the Heracross missed its Cross Chop, and we ended up getting the kill with a Flamethrower. This left him with just Hitmonlee, so I brought in Wordyr, and with the Intimidate, we could survive a high jump kick. Yes, we can't stay in anymore, but now that its attack is lowered, we can safely swap out into someone else. Golem, who would not get hit by a single move because it started setting up Meditates, and with one last Earthquake, Bruno would be defeated. Let's move on to our final Elite Four member, Karen, who would start out with an Umbreon. I hit it with a single Brick Break from Golem before she would swap it out for Honchkrow. That's some absolute diabolical switching if you ask me, because while it was able to hit me with a Steel Wing, our Rock Tomb easily one-shotted it after that. This forced her out into Vileplume, who was up against my Xatu, and as you may know, birds always win against plants, as 2 of my extra sensories did the trick. This left her with 3 Pokemon, Umbreon, Houndoom, and Gengar. 3 very imposing and hard to take down Pokemon if I didn't have a Gyarados with Dragon Dance. Yep, it was Waterfall and Crunch time, and all 3 of those were defeated in an instant. With my full team alive, I felt confident that we could take on the champion without any troubles. So I stepped foot into the room of Lance the Dragon Master and challenged him for the title of champion of Pokemon Heart and Soul. And he was as excited as I was to see my strength after our whole team up in the Team Rocket hideout. And I also wanted to see what what had become of his mighty Dragonite. So let's clash and see who's the biggest titan of the region. First up would be my Wordeer against his Gyarados. He was able to survive a shockwave, set up a rain dance and hit me with a surf, but none of that was enough for my Wordeer to go down and we would finish it off with a second shockwave. He would then swap in his Aerodactyl, who would hit my Golem with a very hard hitting Earthquake, but it wasn't enough to kill and one of my Rock Tombs immediately buried it. That's when he finally brought out that majestic Dragonite, which I of course had the perfect answer for. Dugong's Ice Beam, which one-shotted it. Now I was going to do the same for these next two Dragonites, however, the first one hit me with a Thunder, paralyzed me, and I of course got stuck into paralysis. So yeah, he hit his second Thunder, and I said goodbye to my Dugong. There goes my Deathless Champion run, and this battle just became a lot harder. Nonetheless, I still had to try and win. Firstly, I went into Wordeer to lower its attack and lock it into Outrage. Then, I swapped out into Gyarados and set up a Dragon Dance, tank 2 Outrages, and take it down with 2 more Crunches. This would lead him into his third and final Dragonite. I managed to lower this thing's defense with my first Crunch, but then it bounced up into the sky. I wasn't sure that my Gyarados was going to survive this, so I swapped it into Golem and tried to hit it with a Rock Tomb, but it had Waterfall in its arsenal and easily cleaned my rock off the face of the earth. That's the second Pokemon we have to say goodbye to too soon, and it's one we've had since the start. Golem has served us very well throughout its entire evolution line, and without him, a lot of fights would have become quite a bit more difficult. So losing him was definitely like a shot through the heart, and I knew I couldn't let his death be in vain. So I sent out Xatu, who graciously avoided a Dragon Dance boosted bounce, and then used his extra sensories to take revenge on this terrible rock-killing Dragonite. But Lance still had one last hooray. Charizard, the mascot of the Pokemon Company. I didn't have too many team members to deal with it, so I decided to stay in with Xatu and set up 6 Calm Minds. And in the meantime, he was setting up double teams. But because I was boosting my special defense every turn, he could basically do no damage to me anymore unless he would get a crit. And every time I got low on HP, I would just heal up with Wish. When I was fully set up, it was just a matter of time until I would hit through that double team, connect that extra sensory, and finish off Lance. And while this might have made me the champion of the Johto region, Lance actually informed me that the trainers in Kanto were way stronger than him. One of them, a kid named Red, is even said to be the strongest trainer the world has ever seen. So after putting my balls into the Hall of Fame, I decided I wasn't going to stop. We would conquer the entire Kanto region in search of Red, so that we could challenge him and make our dream of being the strongest trainer in Pokemon Heart and Soul a reality. And so with Elm and Professor Oak's help, we got some boat tickets, boarded the ship inside of Olivine, played hide and seek with a little girl, and arrived in Vermilion City. On the boat, I had heard the rumor that Mew was supposedly hiding under a truck nearby, but the only thing I could find was this old sea map, and I never found out where it led. But now that we were in Kanto, I of course wanted to grab some new Pokemon. So I started by grabbing a Snubbull, and then I evolved a ton of Pokemon I had still left in my boxes. These consisted of Nidoqueen, Arcanine, Weezing, and Raticate. And after some team building, it was time to take on Lieutenant Surge, the first of the Kanto gym leaders. He would boast the incredibly powerful Electric type, and his first 2 Pokemon, Electrode and Manectric, would both die to extra sensories fired off by my Farigiraf. At first, I wanted to swap into Arcanine when Magnezone hit the field, but I knew my Fire-type moves wouldn't do enough damage as the rain was up. So instead, I went into Ursaring and didn't realize that Thunder was going to do this much damage. And I absolutely didn't want to swap anybody else into this kind of firepower, so all I could do was hope that I would outspeed and kill it with a Dig. However, this wasn't the case, and the Magnezone hit a second Thunder, and that's how I lost my first Pokemon in the first gym battle in Kanto. It couldn't have gone much worse, but at least now I could safely bring in Arcanine, hit that Dig, and one-shot that Magnezone. But Surge seemed to have an answer for everything, because out came his Lantern. I couldn't risk taking a rain-boosted Surf with Arcanine, so I swapped out into Raticate. He would only be able to hit one Dig on this Lantern before getting washed away and Thunderbolted, which meant the second death in Kanto immediately arrived as well. I was just glad to hear that those were Pokemon that I was probably not going to use from here on out. Now that the rain was gone, however, I brought Arcanine back out, tanked the Surf, and killed it with 2 more Digs. Raichu would also get destroyed by a single Dig, which left him with just Electivire. So we combined Arcanine and Weezing's powers together to get my 9th batch, and it made me realize that Kanto was not to be messed with. So I promised to the rest of my boxes that I'd bring my A team for the upcoming 7 gym battles, with the next one being located in Celadon City against the grass type leader Erica. And she was an absolute piece of cake, because with the flames of Houndoom and Rapidash, we lit up her gym and swept through her entire team. This is what I wanted to see more of. But the next gym leader would be Misty, who wasn't around when I checked out Cerulean. But I had heard some rumors of troubles at the power plant. A thief stole a machine part from the generator here, and he was last seen in Cerulean City. And with the authorities already being too busy, they sent me out to go and fix it. After going through the ordeal of finding the culprit, we find out that it's actually a member of Team Rocket from a different country. His English really isn't that good, and he has no idea that Team Rocket has been disbanded. So I showed him what I did to all of his brethren, and after begging me for mercy, he revealed that he had hidden the machine part somewhere in Cerulean City Gym. So I picked it up, brought it back to the power plant, and restored the entire electricity network of the Kanto region. This also brought tons of electric type Pokemon back to the area, so I captured an Electrike and immediately evolved it into Manectric because he would be crucial in the gym battle against Misty, who had finally returned back to her gym after I cut her date short by interrupting one of the most romantic moments she probably would have had. She then tried to get back at me but clearly failed as Manectric thunderbolted her first Pokemon Golduck, and Dragonite then swept through the rest of her team after being allowed to set up 6 Dragon Dances. With the Cascade badge in hand, I immediately flew to the other side of the region in Fuchsia. This is where we would take on Koga's daughter Janine, who just like her father boasted poison types. I of course thought this was going to be an easy sweep with Xatu, but I should have set up a Calm Mind, because while I was two-shotting most of her Pokemon, when her Crobat eventually hit the field, we got poisoned by a Sludge Bomb and whittled down to 23 HP. But when I wanted to swap out to escape death with Xatu, she clicked the worst move ever. Pursuit, which hits your opponent's Pokemon before they can even swap out. And because of that reckless misplay, I lost one of our best and most loyal Pokemon. Xatu was there for everything. He got us through it all. And now we just gotta let him go because I wasn't cautious enough. And now I pay the price. I knew he wanted me to keep going and prove everybody wrong. And so with the power of Piloswine's Icy Wind and Farigirif's Extrasensories, justice would be struck down on Janine. And I would find myself one badge richer. And from here on out, I would be way more cautious. Starting out in the Sabrina battle, her first Arcanine would deal with Mr. Mime after spamming flamethrowers. But when Slowbro hit the field, I immediately brought in Dragonite, set up my 6 Dragon Dances, and cleaned up each and every Pokemon she threw at me. From here on out, I traveled all the way to Pewter City, where we'd faced off against Mr. Drying Pan Brock. Here I would see what Donphan's power would look like, as it took down Golem and Kabutops with Earthquakes and even tanked the Surf. Quagsire would then continue to spam Earthquakes to take on the incoming Omastar as well. Feraligatr and his Waterfalls would knock Aerodactyl out of the sky. Gloom would get her one moment in the spotlight by taking down Relicanth with a single Petal Dance, but she wouldn't live for much longer because this locked her into this move, which made her an easy target for Kleavor's Rock Slide. Yes, another death, but one I absolutely didn't care about. Feraligatr and Piloswine would then team up with their Waterfall and Icy Wind to take down Kleavor, giving me the Boulder Badge and letting me serve all the way to the Sea Foam Islands. This is where a bald man named Blaine set up his gym because his last one got erupted by a volcano or something, and I only have to say 3 words to describe this battle: Dragon Dance, Waterfall, victory. That's all it took to get my Volcano badge. But there was still one gym leader left, and he agreed to fight me if I could get the 7 other badges. His name was Blue, the grandson of Professor Oak and the rival of the legendary trainer Red. And if we were to defeat him at the Viridian City gym, he'd not only give me the last gym badge we need, but also Red's location. A deal I absolutely couldn't pass upon. And so our battle started, as I one-shotted his Rhyperior with Feraligatr's Waterfall. Houndoom would then make quick work of Exeggutor with a Flamethrower. Tyranitar would get superpowered, Machamp wing attacked, Pidgeot poison jabbed, and lastly would be his dog Arcanine, who fell down into the waterfall. As Blue hands over his gym badge to me, he also reveals that the location of Red is actually in Johto, in a very secluded place called Mount Silver that can only be visited by the strongest of trainers. And you even need to be approved by his grandpa Oak to go there. At this point, I've beaten everybody I've come across, so naturally after telling Oak, we got access to the mountain too. And after a very long climb up its icy tops, we would stand face to face with the legendary trainer Red. No matter what happened in this fight, it would mark the end of my journey. Now I just had to find out if I could see it through in the harshest conditions possible. So after looking each other in the eye and saying nothing, I would send out my Donphan against his Pikachu. And even with a level difference of 23, I would still one-shot it after surviving his serve with my sturdy ability. Yes, on the following turn, we might have died to the hail damage, but it's okay. Donphan's sacrifice was necessary to take down Pikachu. And even better for me because this forced out his Venusaur, allowing me to safely bring in Dragonite. And you already knew what I was about to do. Set up those dragon dances. While Venusaur tried to stop me with a Leech Seed, it wouldn't be enough to save his own skin because we KO'd it with a wing attack. Charizard would be no different as he also got one shot, but his Blastoise survived and took down my biggest asset of the Kanto region with a single Ice Beam. After witnessing Dragonite's death, Fraligator became so enraged that he himself started dragon dancing on the incoming Snorlax after the hail took down the Blastoise so that he could use his own two hands to avenge all the fallen comrades he has seen throughout this entire video, and proving that we didn't need that shiny Totodile at the start of our run and that he, a regular one, would be perfect. Because with one last superpower and one last crunch, Red's last two team members, Snorlax and Espeon, would be defeated. And that's the story of how I blindly hardcore nuzlocked Pokemon Heart and Soul. An absolute wonderful reimagining of the Johto games that I could recommend to all of you. So if that Johto itch starts to creep up on you again, make sure to give this game a shot. With that out of the way, I of course want to thank my membership supporters for helping me out and making wonderful videos like this possible. You have no idea how much you guys' support means to me. So once again, thank you very much. And with all of that out of the way, people, I've been Zwiggo, and I'll see you all in the next one.